Hi everyone, my name is Guille Amaral. I work for Quorum Software currently, and today I'm going to present a personal project, an experiment, if you will, that I made, part of which I call Webside, after an idea of pretension of having a web IDE for Smalltalk, and when I say Smalltalk, any Smalltalk, and this is kind of a wordplay. And the other part is that, yeah, it's like this front-end IDE is mounted on top of an API, so it's kind of considering Smalltalk as a backend, so the web side of a Smalltalk. So blame on me, this is a React project. In my defense, what I can say is that it was the beginning of the pandemic isolation, so I started to play a bit with this famous, very popular framework. So I started like most of us would, like reading documentation, watching some introduction videos, and trying to follow a tutorial, but turns out that tutorials out there like not that interesting. And so what I did was to take a previous work I had done in which I exposed internal tools of Smalltalk IDE through web APIs. So then it was in the context of testing the web application framework of Smalltalk. So then I could bring these tools to a web browser. And these tools, well, the framework facilities were like Angular JS and Bootstrap and blah, blah, blah. So it was fair enough. I could bring these browsers, these IDE tools to the browsers. They were far from being operational. They worked, so I decided to take this as a backend. However, I decided to rethink about this instead of assuming that I will have these objects representing IDE tools inside my image. I decided to consider the image as a whole as my backend and see how far I could reach with this. So in this way, I could have the web IDE implemented in React. And then I could not only allow multiple users to access to the same image, and when I say multiple, I say less than half a dozen users, because if we talk about allowing multiple users or hundreds of users accessing to the same image, to my understanding, that's Gemstone. But also, I could try to do something like this, like using the same IDE to access different Smalltalks, provided that I could implement this API if it is general enough and simple enough, so it's not a pain to implement it in different dialects. So that's the way I went. Regarding this, I was talking to some of my friends about this project, and this idea of a set implemented in React pointed to a Smalltalk, reminded me this famous scene of Face Off, like the good guy with the face of bad guy, right? So anyway, the API, I will try to go fast over this list. These are like categories or groups of these endpoints. So for instance, to retrieve code, there are a bunch of endpoints. Remember this, I started like playing with React, then implementing an API, and then iterating and adding more endpoints. It's not that, you cannot see it, right? Completely. How can we do? Let's try to go this way. Okay, so there are endpoints to retrieve objects from the meta level, classes, variables, categories, methods. And interesting thing here is that I try to, I had this tendency to go after REST-ish API, so I consider resources like methods. So if you take the whole set of methods in the image, you can implement queries to retrieve implementers, senders, and the typical searches you have in any Smalltalk, right? So, and there is some variable segment there like name or selector, so the URIs contain specific names, right? So here is an example. I don't know if you can read it, but to get the class fraction, where I have a JSON representation of the class fraction with some very arbitrary properties, but I followed my common sense, name, definition, package, whatever. The same as a hierarchy, like classes from a root class, in this case Boolean. It helps to have a subset of the whole hierarchy. Method of a class. In this case, again, I have a JSON representation of a method, like selector, method class, and blah, blah, blah. And there, I didn't put here some common properties that every object will have, like class, if it is indexable, and a print string, that is something that will help implement an inspector on the front-end side. Again, a method. Yeah.
I have a question. You said you're using JSON. Do you handle references, like an object reference and another object reference like the first one?
Yeah, well, the thing is that once you get the JSON of an object, you just get the that object, not more than that, and you can traverse it using a way. I will reach to that in a moment. So variables, categories, and, well, implementers. With this, what I could do is something like this. Well, I have here different tabs with different Smalltalks, backends. I implemented this API in different Smalltalks. So if we go, for instance, to here, we can have the typical class hierarchy browser where I can go to, let's say, a little bit bigger. You mean the window? It falls outside of the... Well, anyway, you have here more or less what you can find in the typical refactoring browser, only from these endpoints, right? So if we, for instance, look for implementers, senders, everything, if we go to Faro and look the same for the same class, we can do it. There you have duration, I don't know. And you have the method, the class definition, the comment. The same for dolphin. Let's go to the same class, magnitude. All right. You also have the class duration here. And for vast, and let's take a look at the same class. Again, you also have duration class. So anyway, this is more or less, and again, from any place like, I don't know, here as nanoseconds, implementers, blah, blah. So going back to the presentation, so changes. I will need this. Oh, there is no way to continue without. Well, here I have the previous endpoints. So one of the options was to go and implement some CRUD operations on them. But it turns out that changes that you can apply on a Smalltalk system go beyond CRUD operations, and probably you can implement them using CRUD operations, but in that case, all the logic will fall on the client side. So instead of doing that, this is very difficult because they have animations, so.
So if you go to slideshow,
Yeah.
and there's a menu at the top.
Yeah.
Menu slideshow, then setup. It's under animation setup. Click, and then browse a window.
Browse. Okay.
And then say OK. Now go to slideshow, and now make your window smaller.
All right. Thank you very much, James.
And then you can position the window exactly. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Down if you want to.
Okay.
Now you have full window
Yeah.
position.
Thank you very much. Changes. So instead of going after this bunch of endpoints, I decided to have just one single endpoint for both applying and retrieving changes to a Smalltalk system. So since my tour through all these dialects showed me that more or less you have the historical refactoring process changes reify, I could make use of them. And even more, I can use refactorings. So, for example, if I want to compile a method, I can use this add method change with this structure there. Like I want to compile a method, so the type is that method, the source code is that. So in response, I will get this as another change of the actual change that has been applied with some other properties, like, for instance, the timestamp, right? And what happens if something goes wrong? Like in this case, I have 1 plus nothing, so the API specifies that there should be there is something wrong there. So not only the HTTP error code, but also the API specifies a description and the interval if it applies, right? So, and more interesting, why not to extend this by, for instance, if I try to compile this method x plus 1 in object, where x is not defined, well, besides the description and the interval where the thing is wrong, I can get some suggestions, where a suggestion is just a description plus a set of changes. So, for instance, if the suggestion is declare this variable as a temporary variable, I can apply the change that contains more or less the original change, except that it contains the declaration of the x. Or if I want to define this as an instance variable, there are 2 changes, one for defining the x as an instance variable, and then the original change. So this way, the front end will be able to not only display these descriptions, but apply these changes if the user decides. So with this, it is possible. So now go back to, I don't know, duration, define a new duration here, and well, doesn't expand this by their own. So now I can have here a, I don't know, 10 seconds, whatever. Blah. Can compile that, can rename that, can rename classes, 10 seconds, blah. Can, I don't know, things like moving instance variable from one side to the other, removing, renaming, every change defined within this refactoring browser changes hierarchy is possible here. So what else? That's,
Question?
yeah.
When you say every change that's available for this refactoring browser, are you querying the server for what it supports, or are you just assuming that it supports?
For the moment, I am assuming, well, the question was if I am assuming the set of changes, and the answer is yes. For the moment, I am assuming set of changes, available changes, but can be queried from the server. Well, the same here. It's possible to do the same. Right. Let's go back to the presentation. So next step was evaluation. So if I, again, this was all done from a naive approach. Like I just wanted to have a front end working against a Smalltalk. So I define this kind of thing. So if I want to evaluate an expression, I can have these endpoint evaluations where I can just put an expression plus a couple of things more, like if I want, the first thing that that you find there is that you can be waiting forever if you make this call synchronous. So instead of doing that, you can make it asynchronous. And the other thing is that if you don't pin somehow the object on the server side, you might lose the reference, so it can be collected by the GC. So the front end is, I don't know, inspecting an object that is garbage collected, and you will have some errors. So in this case, I send this evaluation, synchronous evaluation there, and what I receive here is the again, the representation of an object where you see not only these common properties, class, indexable, blah, 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 but also an IDE that for the sake of this presentation, I use short IDEs, but they are unique IDEs, right? So here's the synchronous version of that. In that case, the response is like the state of this evaluation. In the process in the server, a process will be forked to evaluate this expression, and the server will keep some sort of state. So that way, I can either poll, or if I have some bidirectional channel, I can get informed when the evaluation finishes. But in any case, I can use, and this is the next section, this endpoint objects with the ID I got from the previous one, like 41. And what I got is, well, the same I got previously with the asynchronous call, right? Except that this will freeze until the evaluation finishes if this evaluation. And notice that the ID is the same as the evaluation in the case of asynchronous call. So there is another endpoint to retrieving objects. All the objects all in the on the server side. And here's the thing: since I know this is a rectangle, since I know I have this property class there, I can get instance variables using one of the previous endpoints, and then I can use them to form a new URI, and that way traverse the object graph. This has many limitations. One of them you mentioned the other day, the size of the URL has a physical limitation. But you can use here either name variables or indexes where this property indexable of an object tells it is indexable. So you can get the size in that case, and then you can use /22 to go to the, and this is a way to, I found to, again, a naive way to traverse the object graph in order to implement an inspector. Yeah.
I'm not sure you said it, but who's keeping the object?
The server.
So who's keeping the object from not being garbage collected? So because you had an expression which resulted in a new object, but someone needs to hold on to
Okay, well, the question was who keep the reference of an object when you evaluate this. If you are in the front end uses this property pin in order to tell the server, let's keep a reference of this object. So while this window is open or whatever, yeah, more or less. So this way we could go, I don't know, again to photos, so you can evaluate. There is a workspace there. There is a package browser. I will say a word about packages in a while, but you can, let's say, to A3, inspect this, and here, well, like this request, like evaluate this expression, pin it, so I have it here. And interesting thing here is that these panels, like here and here, uses, besides these properties, another property which is the context. So this here, I have the scope, so the bindings of this inspector. Like for instance, if I put here self and print it, is the point I am inspecting. The same with this code pane there, so I can evaluate x, or even assign x, right? So x equals 1, do it, and you see it has changed, right? So the same here, self here is the class, like if you will expect, right? What else? Well, debuggers. What happens if I send this expression to evaluate, like 1, 2, 3, blah? Well, it's the idea is that you will receive an HTTP response plus a description and the ID of the evaluation of the process created. So this way you can create a debugger on the server with this process that was suspended due to this exception as a debuggee, essentially, right? So that's exactly that endpoint for debuggers. Create a debugger on this evaluation 53. So what I got from this is as a response is a new ID with some description. This description comes from the exception, and then I can use this endpoint to retrieve frames of debugger. These are not all the frames, but a frame is not, but just an index and a label. And what I can do is to apply some actions, or let's, for instance, in this case, restart from the frame number 3. So it will then, the top frame will be the undo of block closure, blah, blah, blah. Or I can retrieve the bindings of a given frame. So here I'm talking to debugger 77, and I want to know the bindings of the frame with the index 1, right? So with this, we can use either Smalltalk, but we can send the same expression, blah, evaluate it, and here we have the debugger, right? We have the frames, we have the bindings. You can compile, you can restart. Let's do something more interesting here, like object, also classes, do C, and then C name. And let's debug this. Right. So here I have the debugger, I have the binding. So the layout is, again, the challenge here is I went to Faro, take a look at the debugger of Faro, not only the layout, but the internals. I went to Dolphin, I went to Vast, I went to different Smalltalks, and they the concepts are more or less the same, but the thing, the names, the layouts, everything, it's different. They offer, some of them offer really interesting features that the others don't. But again, well, what I can do, I can get into, I can step over, step into, can restart, everything. Even let's go here and step over and step through. And then there was some funny things that I noticed that, for instance, in this Smalltalk, whenever the debugger paints the expression, it paints the receiver, and here you only get highlighted the message. So that's kind of slightly differences I found within my tour. So debugger. The other interesting part about the debugger, so if two users, I can show you, but if two users, I don't know if I had time, two or more users are connected to the same image, they can use the same debugger in sync, like one controls and the other sees changes. Let me see the time. Okay. What else? So workspaces are just dictionaries that contain, have this binding tables with the variables defined within workspace, but it is required that the server keeps a workspace with some ID. So there is a bunch of endpoints to create and remove workspaces together with their bindings. Test runs, I'm not going into details. Again, these categories in average contain like 5 endpoints, so the API is not that huge. Let's say, I don't know, 40 or so. There are, again, 5 endpoints for test running. So if you, for instance, go to, let's go to date test, or yes, I guess you have a test here. You can test a class, a method, a package. So in this case, I test the class, I'm sorry, and I have this is, again, you will find that test runners look similar between some Smalltalk and very different in other Smalltalks. We can go to date class, and what you got here, let's change something like this. Save this, rerun, and you got the failing test. If I filter this, I can debug this test. Here, well, more or less the same you can do. And the same for B, not for Dolphin yet, not for Bast, and well, next station is Gemstone. And then there is a couple of endpoints for profiling. I can show you, but I prefer to skip it because I don't have too much time. So the challenge, if you will, is to select a common set of options of operations offered by all dialects. But more importantly, the question is it worth it? I mean, probably not. And even when we want to have something like this, let's suppose I have put here just 4 sets of options. Well, in the center you have the intersection, so an IDE with the common operations will be in the center. So this, as you can imagine, if you increase the number of sets, turns into ideal rather than IDE. So it's impossible to get to that. This graph not only contains that you might probably cannot read the GitHub repo of these different implementations, and though the B Smalltalk is more complete, I put it far first because, well, B is not entirely open source yet, even though this API is. So just that. So, and VA was the last, not the last. I am working on another dialect. Probably I will do something more about that before reaching Gemstone. Only code changes, endpoints implemented in VA. So some cons, as you might imagine, that this is not inspectable nor extensible using the same language, which is kind of a principle, I guess, of any Smalltalk. There's no true concurrency. If two or more users try to touch the same thing, can be a mess. So none of the serious problems was addressed here. Messages to, like for instance, if you say transcript show blah, that won't reach the front end unless you have in place some WebSocket or something like that and special mechanics for that. It's impossible, to my understanding, to get to a common subset of options. The server can be a bottleneck, and there is no cleaning policy on the server side. So meaning that you created some objects, and then you leave, and then the objects will remain there like forever. So that's not good. On the bright side, it is fully operational, and I connect this to the other point there that says tested and used for real. Well, in our team, in my team, we try to use it for real. So then, more or less like Martin McClure is doing, taking note of the annoyances. I take note of the errors, I don't know, improvements, whatever, for be Smalltalk. But the tendency there is that a guy used to work within a given environment will want to have more or less the same environment. And the difficult task here is to get a generic IDE again, which is not, I'm probably wrong, but there is even when I'm not a thorough expert, I implemented this API in a couple of classes in a bunch of methods, so it's a kind of thing. Implementation, for sure, a thorough guy can do it better. And it might be useful in some cases, like for instance, the Faro here, I guess, yes, it was running on inside a container. So I know you guys have different tools for addressing this kind of problem, but you can use this tool to access to an image running inside a container and debug it, inspect it, and apply some changes. And then extract changes, which is another area that is not common. So it could be tunnel, it could be file out, but there are plenty options there, but there is no common way to have the source code. Probably from one community, yes, like Faro, but out there, no. What else? It can be used to compare. It can be used for moving code from one side to the other, because again, filing out and filing in has this problem that there's some compatibility issues. If I file out something from Faro and try to file in another dialect, and will face some problems. But here the API specifies a clear way to apply changes, so it's easy to produce changes from one dialect and apply them on another. Some takeaways and next steps. Well, it was super fun, super interesting. I was isolated and playing with this. There's still some, of course, bugs there, and as any product of thing, it evolves if you use it, otherwise it dies. And next station, as I said, is Gemstone. And one of the things that I might probably show you. I have Faro here. I use this sort of communication challenge that two dialects can communicate by sending messages and requesting, hey, evaluate this. I have uploaded the old chess game implemented by Andreas Raab a long time ago here. And I extended with this remote chess player and the some kind of coordinator that essentially creates a remote player representing a different Smalltalk, different dialect. So in this case, I have here playground. So Faro knows nothing about B knows nothing about Faro, but they can use this channel or API to request things to each other. So the coordinator, I don't know if it will work, creates a remote player pointing to B on port 9000, and the coordinator will say to both players, your turn. In the case of Faro, it's a local player, will move, and then send a request to B, it's your turn, let's play, and B will send another request saying, I want to move like this. So, well, it's might probably has to do with this. So, and here, if I open, let me open, where is the transcript here? Oh, here's the transcript. Well, they say no valid moves. They are like messing, but anyway, sorry. Let me restart it. Let me stop it. I was touching it because for the moment, they are playing like dumb players. They are moving only, they are making valid moves randomly from the list of valid moves. So B doesn't know how to play chess. Here, this chess game has a AI, so it knows how to play chess. Oh, it's not completely visible there. So there you have B playing against Faro using this. So if I go to B here, you'll see that, well, I didn't print the movement, but it says playing, right? So it's sending, you don't see it. It says playing, like it's sending a request to Faro requesting a move. So we can leave them playing, and I think that's it. You have any questions? Sure, Nori.
Just something because I look at the cons list.
Yeah.
And I don't find that really severe. Just everything like basically what James was asking, as soon as you reify behavior in the response, you don't have to have the common set of all platforms because you get the list of what's possible on each platform. And the UI just assumes there is, I have a button for action or something, and then the IDE behaves something dynamically with have one more of the outer circles, not the inner one, but the outer circles, which makes it really good. And the other thing to say is, I'm using the sync repo, which is, if you're Emacs based, you know how to type on the terminal, but something is super useful because there is always a point where you have to go on the running image. On the running image.
Yeah.
So because we have all debugging, we make snapshots, right? We make snapdown for the context unblocking stuff. But there's just one point, the error is just in that image. And I use simulator that I really like. And if I had such a tool, so just to give you, this is super useful because then you just have an inspection because it's not really big. You can load it for a production image, and then you connect that one single point and say, how is that possible? And then you have a decent interface even to inspect the running image. So just to give you
Right.
super useful. And the cons are not. So just reading the list and saying, well, that's not too much effort to get rid of the cons. So
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Nuri. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is maybe not related, So meaning that it's over a socket and not, you establish the connection and you use it, it's TCP socket, and you continue using it during the whole session, I guess.
Okay.
While with the rest you have queries and you don't have all, once you get the response, it's over. I don't know if you mentioned it, we'll discuss it at some point, whether the trade-off and why you go rest.
I don't. The question was why did I go by REST instead of establishing a connection, durable connection, bidirectional connection? Well, the answer is I didn't know. I just start playing with this React, and it probably because of the most of the examples you found out there work like that, and so. But yeah, the next step is, and in fact, I am using a WebSocket, but it depends, again, if your Smalltalk at hand supports WebSockets. Like in the case of Faro, case of B, probably all of them support WebSockets nowadays. But for the sync and the chat and the things that I needed a bidirectional, so communication from server to client, I implemented a WebSocket, like a server with a WebSocket outside of the Smalltalk. But it would be better probably to keep the connection. Yeah, Norbert.
No, so one thing is HTTP is all about resources and objects and everything, how resources is a good match. And the point is, you don't tie, so there is a super cool IDE, but why limit it to having WebSockets and all this stuff? It's huge, because I can still script it from the front end, because it's just a couple of requests. I can do this in a bash script or something. So there's more applications which is enabled by REST, because it just reifies the resource model we're accessing. And WebSockets is just that I can make this one time more rich or more immediate.
Yeah.
Slight abstraction, but
Yeah.
I see the point, but for me it's always like, this is clear, this is usable, so
Yeah.
you can use it anyway.
And I did, by the way, Norbert, I didn't include in the cons list the huge pile of shit you have beneath the no package. Like in the JavaScript, I have like 5 dependencies, code mirror. I don't know, I use material UI for the styling, but then you have what you discussed yesterday. You npm installed, and then you have a bulk sorry. Yeah, and by the way, there is a running version hosted in the cloud of this. So you can only need to download your file implementation of the API and run it without taking care about the React stuff. All right, thank you very much.